Lots to talk about on this midweek edition of the show. Bubba Wallace gets brutally honest about things at Richard Petty Motorsports. There's some new issues with Nashville Fairgrounds potentially, and then we get to talk about NASCAR TV ratings, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the attendance we saw at Bristol this last weekend. So it's a full show. Y'all are in for a treat. How's it going, you guys? My name is Eric, and welcome to Out of the Groove. I want to again thank Ridge Wallet for coming on as a sponsor of the show. The Ridge is a minimalist front pocket wallet that helps you reevaluate your everyday carry. This thing is extremely durable as well. It's got two metal plates bound together by elastic, and its sleek design makes it look nothing like a traditional wallet. The Ridge Wallet is slim, RFID blocking, and lifetime guaranteed. It comes in titanium, aluminum, polycarbonate, carbon fiber, and is available in more than 12 different colors and styles. And they have a special deal for fans of the show. You can get 10% off your order with free worldwide shipping by going to ridgewallet.com/groovy. That's ridgewallet.com/groovy. Use that code to get 10% off your order. There's also a link to it down in the description. A huge thank you again for Ridge Wallet coming on to sponsor the show. Now we do have quite a bit to talk about in this episode. It's a midweek episode. Not a lot of new news stories have come out the last couple days. I've seen a lot of back and forth on social media debating whether or not the poor attendance we saw at Bristol, is it a big deal? Is it not that big a deal? A lot of varying opinions on that. We'll get to that in a moment because we're also going to talk about TV ratings from this past weekend's race. But first I want to start with a news story that came out just before this last weekend's race. It was on autoweek.com talking about Bubba Wallace, and he got pretty honest about the state of things over at Richard Petty Motorsports. This article was written by Matt Weaver, and yeah, Bubba Wallace gives some pretty long and kind of insightful thoughts about the state of things over at Richard Petty Motorsports. Not all doom and gloom, I must say, but here's what Bubba Wallace had to say last week. I think the biggest thing is dollar signs. Over the years, we have kind of tiptoed around that, but that's enough of that. We're behind on money. It's all about being upfront and being blunt. It's coming down to a crucial time. We just have to start running better. I always sit there and talk to other people, and I'm like, why would new companies want to come in and sponsor the 43? You can play the race card all you want. You'll get a lot of attention, sure, but for me, I'm competitive and look at results. And new companies don't understand that the more money you spend, the better you do. It's hard to get their heads wrapped around that. Not knocking the partners that we have now, we're very thankful for every opportunity that comes our way. Worldwide Technology jumping on for a majority of the season, Air Force is there, that's nice. I keep saying we are doing a lot with a little. Very refreshing and pretty honest comments there from Bubba Wallace. Now, it's no secret, I've talked about on the show. I did an episode a couple months ago where I went kind of in depth on a lot of this. Richard Petty Motorsports is in deep, deep trouble. They're behind on money, they're behind on sponsorship, they're behind on resources, and now sometimes it feels like they're even behind on manpower. And Bubba Wallace kind of addressing these comments publicly, addressing the situation publicly at least, kind of is the first step we've seen as far as that team kind of acknowledging their troubles. Now, Richard Petty Motorsports specifically, co-owned by Richard Petty, has never been a top team in NASCAR. You know, they've had a couple good cars here and there, they've had some wins occasionally, they've had some decent drivers come through their system, but they've never been a top team in NASCAR. That being said, they weren't always as bad as they are now. In my opinion, this downward skid really began about 2 years ago when Smithfield Foods announced that they would be leaving Richard Petty Motorsports to stay with Eric Almirola as he went over to SHR. Now, if you recall, this led to Richard Petty publicly bashing Smithfield for backing out of their handshake agreement, in which Smithfield responded, and it turned into a public war of words between Richard Petty and one of his longest tenured sponsors. Bad look all around, mainly bad look for Richard Petty, I think, calling out a sponsor that has given you millions of dollars in the past. I don't think that was a smart look, and it probably didn't look good to future potential sponsors. But yeah, when Smithfield left, Richard Petty Motorsports lost a ton of funding as a result. And unfortunately, this came at a very bad time because the very next year, the very first year without Smithfield money backing them, they also had to make the switch over to the Chevy Camaro, which if you recall last year, the Chevy Camaro really didn't perform very well the first few months of the year. So the fact that they not only had to learn a completely new car, completely new chassis, they were also probably in the middle of some budget cuts as a result of Smithfield pulling out. And also going on at the same time as all this, they had a new driver coming into the team, Bubba Wallace. Not just a new driver, mind you, either. A rookie new driver. A driver just getting his feet wet in the Cup Series level, was stepping into an organization that was really in over its head at this point. And so as a result of all these changes hitting all at once, Richard Petty Motorsports last year had a terrible season. I believe 30 cars competed full-time in the Cup Series last year. Richard Petty Motorsports in that 43 car finished 29th in the final standings. And I want to remind you guys again that last October at Talladega, they did not even have a backup car at the track. They rolled into the weekend with just one car and one car only. They couldn't afford to bring and set up a second backup car. And then I remember I made a video a couple months ago before the season started because they didn't even have a crew chief for this year until just a couple weeks before Daytona. They ended up promoting their lead engineer into the role. They couldn't even find a new crew chief. Blickensderfer got the heck out of there. So my main reaction to these comments from Bubba Wallace is it's nice and it's refreshing to hear someone within the organization, you know, the kind of the face of the organization at this point, besides Richard, I guess. It's refreshing to at least hear him kind of address these concerns. You know, acknowledge the fact that the team has financial problems. You know, there are a lot of teams, especially small teams in NASCAR these days, that have some financial problems. Richard Petty Motorsports, I know it's the king, you know, they're not immune to these problems. But that being said, while it's nice they're acknowledging the problem, that alone isn't going to fix anything. I said at the beginning of this year that part of me doesn't think Richard Petty Motorsports will make it through the whole season. I mean, we've already seen 2 weeks ago at Martinsville, STP revealed that they have pulled back some of their sponsorship. STP. They've been with Richard Petty for decades and decades now, and even they're starting to pull back on their sponsorship. Things really just don't look good over there, and it really sucks. It sucks for Bubba Wallace too that, you know, he's coming to the Cup Series. He's a guy with tons of charisma, tons of backing, tons of fan support. He's getting tons of public attention as well. He was on Kevin Hart's show recently. He's been on tons of morning shows before. He's getting a ton of public attention, but he's on a team that just can't compete. They really can't. I don't think Bubba Wallace is, you know, necessarily a top driver in the Cup Series. I think you could even put him in like the 18 car or the 4 car, and I think he'd be okay. I'm not saying Bubba Wallace is a championship caliber driver in the Cup Series, but he's decent. He can run well if he had a good opportunity, and unfortunately Richard Petty Motorsports is a terrible opportunity. And it sucks for him, it sucks for the organization, it sucks all around that it's come to this. But maybe them publicly acknowledging these struggles is the first step towards them righting the ship, but I don't know. Things just don't look good over there, and it sounds like it's only a matter of time before they ultimately fold. I mean, if Furniture Row Racing couldn't stay in business when they were still winning races, I don't know if Richard Petty Motorsports has that much time left, guys. It's sad to see. I'll transition to my next topic. Man, this is kind of a downer episode because this one's not that great either. Nashville Fairgrounds Speedway has run into some issues lately. If you don't remember, a few months back, it was announced that Speedway Motorsports was going to work with the people at Nashville Fairgrounds Speedway in an attempt to renovate the racetrack and hopefully get NASCAR racing back there in the coming years. Fans who are all excited about the more short tracks, movement were very excited by this news. Nashville Fairgrounds, a historic track right there in NASCAR country. It'd be great to see it come back. A lot of fans were very excited, and it sounds like maybe NASCAR got a little ahead of themselves. The Tennessean did a couple stories on this in the last week that highlights some potential hangups that the people over at Nashville Fairgrounds have run into recently. Most notably, one thing that's already happening kind of over in that area by the Fairgrounds Speedway is a Major League Soccer stadium is being built over there by the racetrack. That by itself isn't too big of an issue, but now apparently developers are planning to build a new apartment complex less than 20 feet away from Nashville Fairgrounds Speedway's main entrance. 20 feet, we're talking basically the length of my room here. The people over at Fairgrounds Speedway have said that this would basically be a deal breaker. They can't have an apartment complex right by the main entrance. It would make getting people in and out of the racetrack virtually impossible, especially when you have 30, 40, 50,000 people there for a cup race. Tony Formosa, the current operator over at Nashville Fairgrounds Speedway, has gone back and forth with city council members recently trying to discuss the legalities of these development plans that are going on. One council member, Colby Sledge, kind of fired back at Nashville Fairgrounds Speedway. He said, "These regulations and deadlines have been in place for years. I want to have a productive conversation regarding the track, but it is impossible with the operator's continued violations." And now this leads to another report from the Tennessean again earlier this week that Tony Formosa, the operator over at Nashville Fairgrounds Speedway, has violated his contract multiple times. They say he's done this by violating curfew agreements, by running cars on track when he isn't supposed to. Apparently he's been racking up late rent payments, and he also owes money to concessions people from last year. So in other words, it seems like the discussion between, the city of Nashville, Nashville Fairgrounds, SMI, and NASCAR, all those discussions have kind of hit a roadblock, it appears. And if you want my reaction to this, it sounds like, to me, at least this is how it sounds to me, it sounds like the people over at Nashville Fairgrounds, saw that NASCAR fans wanted more short tracks. They thought to themselves, wouldn't this be amazing? This is our chance to get back in there, lobby with NASCAR, lobby with Speedway Motorsports Incorporated, and get us a Cup Series date back. That's what their plan was. And it sounds like they had all these ideas, and they didn't really, do their homework. They didn't do their research. They knew, they had to have known that, the city of Nashville and everyone was planning on building a Major League Soccer stadium right there next to the track. They had to have known that. They had to have been aware of that there were major development plans already in motion. It looks to me like the people involved were just really excited about the idea of bringing NASCAR back to Nashville, and they kind of jumped the gun maybe with the announcement before they actually had a real plan in place. Because right now it looks like it's kind of being revealed now that Nashville Fairgrounds has no plan to get NASCAR back. It looks like every plan that is in place kind of means no NASCAR. Nobody really knows the future of Nashville Fairgrounds Speedway, whether or not it'll ever be a viable option for NASCAR to come back to. It looks to me though that, the people over at that racetrack, the people at SMI, the people at NASCAR really are aggressively trying to appease the more short tracks crowd. They're looking for a quick fix to make those fans happy, and it looks like they just jumped the gun with this one. If they'd done their homework, if they'd really dived in deep when they had this idea, they probably would have seen that it was going to be very difficult given all the other development plans that are going on nearby. The truth is, a major change like bringing a new track and renovating it and putting it back on the schedule, that doesn't happen overnight. That doesn't happen even in a year. That takes many years, and it just sounds like, as with a few other things we've talked about recently, it sounds like NASCAR is really rushing a lot of these decisions. They're really jumping the gun on a lot of these things, really trying to find that quick fix, find that quick moneymaker that's gonna appease a lot of these loudest critics, a lot of the loudest fans that are unhappy with the current product. That's what NASCAR's trying to do, whether it be with announcing the 2020 schedule, making that a huge event, and not giving any details about some of the things in that schedule, whether it's this Fairgrounds announcement kind of coming before they actually knew if they had a plan or not. It just sounds like NASCAR is desperate to make fans happy, which is a good thing. It's good that NASCAR is really trying to make fans happy, but it sounds like they're just rushing things. They're not really giving it any thought. They announced the Gen 7 will be here in 2021, and then we find out that they're kind of behind on production, and that it probably won't be ready by 2021. But they want to make fans happy. They really want to make fans happy, and they want to make them happy right now, but they just can't. These things don't happen overnight. Making a brand new car takes a couple of years. Bringing an old track, renovating it, putting it back on the schedule takes a few years. Creating the perfect NASCAR schedule isn't going to happen from one year to the next. It's going to take a couple of years. I want NASCAR to understand this. I talked about this in a video last week. I don't want NASCAR to rush into these changes. I want NASCAR to take their time and make one or two great changes that they put a lot of thought behind that'll make the sport better for years to come. You can't just make these snap decisions like this and expect them all to work out, because that's not how it works. It's a good problem to have because at least NASCAR is trying to make the fans happy. Whether it be adding another short track to the schedule, changing the schedule completely, bringing a new race car to the track. That's all things that most fans want from NASCAR. So at least they're trying to do things that fans want them to do. The problem is they just got to be real with themselves, and they got to be real with the fans. You can't say, hey, we're going to try and bring Fairgrounds Speedway back, and then we find out a couple months later that, oh, that's probably not going to happen. Like NASCAR, do your homework, take your time on these decisions, and then let the fans know. Anyway, y'all, the last thing I want to talk about in this episode are TV ratings, because we have numbers from Bristol. Firstly, as far as attendance figures are concerned, it was estimated that Bristol Motor Speedway's Sunday Cup race saw 38,000 fans in the stands. I predicted about 40,000, so yeah, it was roughly 40,000, slightly less than 40,000, in a venue that seats 150K. Now, we don't have attendance figures for every race this season in NASCAR. In fact, it's all kind of estimations, but with Bristol being at 38,000, that makes it the second least attended race of the year, if I had to guess. I know Phoenix seats about 40,000, and I heard that they were in the low 30s for the spring race, so Phoenix was probably the least attended race this year on the Cup Series side. Bristol, though, slots in at second. TV ratings actually looked okay, though. Adam Stern from Sports Business Journal reported that Bristol saw a 1.7 overnight rating for the Cup Series race, and this race saw an estimated 2.8 million viewers. Now, there's no direct comparison to last year, because last year's Bristol Spring Race was run on a Monday, and that race got a 1.5. However, it's worth noting that that race on a Monday was actually shown on the main Fox broadcast channel. So the fact that, an FS1, a cable channel race, still outdrew a broadcast channel race is significant, even though obviously last year's race was run on a Monday afternoon. So you can't compare the two. However, if we compare weekends, this weekend compared to last year's weekend, we were at Texas Motor Speedway last year this same time, and that race was also an FS1, and it drew the same rating as this year's Bristol race. So as far as comparing last year's Texas to this year's Bristol, both on FS1, both the same weekend, they both had approximately the same amount of viewership. So as you can see see from that, TV ratings still looking pretty good for NASCAR. Across the board through the first 8 races this year, ratings are up approximately 3 to 4% when compared to last year. So that's a small gain, but a gain nonetheless. Now regarding the attendance issues, I talked about some of this on Sunday after the race in my video then, but I'll go a little bit more in depth here. Lots of fans were very quick to mourn, the poor attendance that they saw, in the race on Sunday. If you recall, I had Alan Bestwick, came on the podcast on this channel a couple months back. We had Alan Bestwick on, famed NASCAR broadcaster, been around the sport for decades, and he brought up a good point. A lot of major sports are struggling with live attendance these days.
Every sport right now, and that includes the NFL, is struggling to sell tickets or to maintain their ticket sales. Everyone. There are very few exceptions to that. Alabama football isn't struggling to sell tickets. Okay, I get that. But an awful lot of Division I college football programs are. Major League Baseball, pro football. You look at some of those games in November and December, and especially in some of the areas where the weather is bad, and see how many seats weren't filled. They may have sold the tickets, but the seats weren't being used. Live attendance in this era where everything is televised is challenged, and NASCAR's not immune to that.
Just earlier this week, baseball season just started out, and the Baltimore Orioles saw a record low crowd at one of their games recently. They had just over 6,000 people in attendance for this game. That was a record low for the Baltimore Orioles, which is, a major baseball team in a pretty sizable market, I guess, by baseball standards. The NFL has seen slight dips in attendance over the last couple years as well. The only sport that hasn't really struggled too much with attendance is the NBA. And I do think this is interesting. I know you guys hate it when I compare stick and ball sports to motorsports, but I like doing it because I think it tells us a lot about the human mentality. The fastest growing sport in America right now is the NBA, basketball. The fastest growing motorsport right now in America is Formula One. If we look at how those two are similar, the NBA games are 2.5 hours long compared to the slugfest of 3.5 hour long baseball games or 3 hours football games. The NBA, a little shorter, a little sweeter. Formula One is basically the NBA of the racing world. You got NASCAR 3.5 hours long. IndyCar is usually at least 2.5 hours long, 2 to 2.5 hours long. Formula One races an hour and a half. I remember at the beginning of the season when Denny Hamlin said that NASCAR should consider shortening the length of some races. This is why I bring these arguments up, because he might have a point. But focusing primarily on NASCAR, I don't mean to point to these other sports and say, NASCAR doesn't have a problem. See, every sport's struggling. I'm not here to say that, because obviously NASCAR is further in this hole than a lot of these other sports. NASCAR is struggling more than the NFL. NASCAR struggling more than baseball. I'm not going to sit here and deny that. But my point in bringing up these arguments is that NASCAR's, declining attendance, while bad, while not good, it's not out of this world. And I think some people have made it out to be a bigger deal recently than it probably should be. Keep in mind that just 10, 15 years ago, every single race on the NASCAR schedule, they'd fill 100,000 people in the stands. Week after week after week, they'd have 100, 150,000 people in the stands every single track we went to for 30 races or more a year. No other sport in America does that. Not even the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl doesn't even bring 100,000 people together usually. The fact that NASCAR could consistently pack 100,000 people into different venues across the country week after week after week, that's not supposed to happen. There is literally no other sport in America that's capable of doing that, that's ever been capable of doing that. In other words, NASCAR 15 years ago was in godlike status. We always talk about how it rivaled the NFL as far as TV ratings went. It was tops. It was a huge deal. It went from godlike status to what I would say now is more realistic status. They're dealing with a lot of the same problems baseball is dealing with. Things aren't great on the attendance front or even really on the TV ratings front. Well, yeah, they're up from last year, but last year sucked, so we really shouldn't be comparing to last year. But my point is, while things aren't great for NASCAR right now, they definitely aren't as great as they once were, it's not horrible. It's not completely over. NASCAR's not dead. NASCAR's not even dying. This last weekend's race for IndyCar, they had 280,000 people watch that race on TV. 280,000 people. Bristol, for NASCAR, had almost 3 million. IndyCar drew 10% of NASCAR's audience this last week on TV. And if IndyCar, I know they've had to shrink their operation quite a bit over the years, but if IndyCar can still chug along like this year after year, competing with 20 plus cars on the racetrack, 20 plus drivers, still draw people's attention, still get to go to great venues, if IndyCar, drawing 280,000 people on TV to their sport, if they can keep chugging along like this, I think NASCAR is going to be here to stay for the long run. Some people, I shouldn't say a lot of people, but some people are actually convinced that in 5 years or so, when NASCAR has to restructure the TV deal, NASCAR is going to die. That's what some people believe. Some people actually believe that. And I'm sorry, if you are one of those people watching this, you're wrong. NASCAR is not going to die in 5 years. Not even close. I've just seen a lot of negativity this week. Keep in mind that the Bristol night race last year was pretty much jam-packed. So it's not like Bristol doesn't sell tickets. It's just people now kind of just go to one of the races, not so much the other one. So yeah, this last week wasn't great. Didn't make NASCAR look amazing or anything. But the racing was fantastic. Most of us agree on that. Yeah, I don't think NASCAR's in any major danger anytime soon. They obviously, they're trying to make changes. They need to try and fix their sport and try to up the interest again. But the people who still think NASCAR's dying, thinks that it's just, only a few years, only a matter of time until NASCAR goes down the tubes. You guys are just kidding yourself. You guys need to get a new hobby. Find something else to hate on. Anyway, you guys, that's my show. Went a little longer than I meant to, but this might be the only episode I get to upload this week, so I wanted to jam all my thoughts into this one video. But thanks everyone for watching. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram. Links to those are down in the description. Thanks for checking that out. You can also get your own Out of the Groove shirt. Merchandise is also available if you want to support me and support the show over there. Also, thank you to my Patreon supporters. Michael Harrison, at You As of the Stars, selfishgifts.com. Cameron James, John Koblenz, Tim Shingen, Jason Arlong, Isaac Dennison, Wesley Donaldson, Nika Suzuki, all these amazing Patreon supporters. Thank you all so much for the continued support of me and this channel. Got some pretty exciting things coming up for the summer. Got some pretty fun plans. I might be hinting at those sometime soon, but you guys are going to be seeing me going to a lot of new places and taking you guys with me for it for every single step of the way. Can't wait to do that with you guys, and thanks so much for the support on Patreon. It really means a lot. But anyway, y'all, thanks for watching. Yeah, I'm not sure that I'm having another episode up this week. The race is Saturday night at Richmond, which should be fun. Should be exciting to see our first night race of the year. Didn't even realize it. Yeah, first night race of the year. Going to be a lot of fun. Another short track. I'm excited. Hopefully you guys are too. I'll be back out with another Out of the Groove later this weekend. But until then, hope you guys have a great rest of your week. I'll see you then. Bye-bye, everyone.